Alright, I'm going to talk about the western states, United States of America now. And we'll start with Wisconsin, which is at the top, next to Canada. It's a cold state. I know the people that really love football, both the college football as well as the pro team, the Green Bay Packers, very famous. Next to Wisconsin is Minnesota. And Minnesota has some good schools. Yeah, there's quite a few people. I don't really know a lot about the state besides there's educated people there. But it's a little bit cold place. It's there, by Wisconsin. Then below Minnesota, you have Iowa. And below Iowa, you have Missouri. My image of both of those is similar. I think of them as countryside. A lot of farming happens in those states. But they do have universities, they have their own big cities. So I think there's plenty of jobs and people and educated people there. But it's a lot of countryside. So you'd probably only go to like the big cities like St. Louis in Missouri, for example. But I've never been there. Okay, then if we go west and we start from the top, west of Minnesota you have North Dakota and South Dakota. Now these two Dakotas, I can't really tell you any difference except that north of North Dakota is Canada, and probably slightly colder than South Dakota because it's more north. But to me, they're basically the same. We refer to them as the Dakotas, and they're mainly just farmland. I think population's very small. There's not really any really big cities there. There's not a lot to see there. Or to do, I think, for that matter. Below the Dakotas, you have Nebraska, and Nebraska is also known for its farming, but it does have some big cities and businesses are there. I visited it. There's cities and sometimes people do business there. Its images. It's right in the middle of America. It's like the most central located state. Below Nebraska, you have Kansas. Kansas is famous in America for some old stories and movies with characters that were from Kansas. I think Kansas is known to be a very flat state. I don't think there's any mountains there, and it's right in the middle there with Nebraska. So you don't have ocean, you don't have mountains. It's mainly just farming. I don't think there's any specific like big sightseeing spots or anything in particular. When I think of Kansas, I just know it's referred to a lot of times in movies or storybooks in the past, like old classic stories, like Wizard of Oz. The main character in Wizard of Oz was in Kansas, was from Kansas. Okay, so then below Kansas you have Oklahoma, and my image of Oklahoma is, Oklahoma is right above Texas, and Texas is the largest state in the United States. Texas has the oil industry, it has cowboys, and Oklahoma is just right above Texas. And so my image of Oklahoma is actually, it's very similar to Texas, except that it's just above it, and so it's surrounded by land, whereas Texas, the southern part of Texas connects to Mexico on the west side, and on the east side it connects to the Gulf of Mexico ocean. So from Texas you have ocean side, and you also have the border with Mexico. So there's Mexican influence. So I would say Oklahoma is similar to Texas, except that it doesn't have as much of a Mexican influence. Whereas Texas, since it borders Mexico, there are a lot of Mexicans that go into Texas, and Texas is known for Tex-Mex food, which is like a hybrid of kind of American food and Texas food. American food and Mexican food. Okay, and now if we go west of Texas, we have New Mexico. And New Mexico is, I think sometimes people get confused, but it's not Mexico, it's America, and the state is called New Mexico. Originally a long time ago in the history of America, I think part of Texas and New Mexico and Arizona were all part of Mexico, but during the U.S.-Mexican War, the U.S. took over that land, and they named New Mexico, New Mexico. There's not a large population. I think it's one of the poorest countries in America. I think New Mexico and maybe Alabama or Arkansas, Mississippi maybe I think those 4 states are probably the poorest in America. For that lowest, they have the average lowest income, I think, among people. But again, the population is not very large. And New Mexico has a lot of kind of desert type terrain. It can get relatively hot because it's there in the south. And it's known for, I think the US military uses that state sometimes for military experiments because there's not a lot of people and it has a lot of desert. Okay, so if we move up from New Mexico, you got Colorado. Colorado has a great image. Colorado is very famous for skiing, for snow sports. It has a lot of nature. It has big cities. Colorado is known for like people have houses or cabins in the mountains. I think it has rivers and lakes. So there's a lot of nature and a lot of outdoor activities to do in Colorado. Above Colorado you have Wyoming. So Wyoming's image is more of a countryside state. There's not really a big city per se. There's not really a lot to do there. There's a lot of nature. I think people like fly fishing or hunting type things and farming. That's about it. Okay, above Wyoming you have Montana. Montana is a large state, but again it's pretty much just a countryside state. It's right there on the border with Canada. It can be relatively cold. There are places there to fish in the summer. There's skiing, a lot of farming. That's about the only image I have. People who go there seem to like it. It might be a nice place, especially if you like nature, to go. Okay, and then next to Montana, if we go west, you got Idaho. Idaho is a very unique state. It's a very unique shape. It's not that big. It's not that famous. I think people outside of America don't tend to know Idaho much. It's famous for potatoes, growing potatoes. It's also famous for being a place for skiing. Some wealthy people sometimes like to have like a vacation home there, like to go skiing, for example. It's also known as the headquarters of KKK, Ku Klux Klan. So it tends to be a conservative state, and it also has a reputation to be racist, which is kind of unique for being so close to the West Coast. But the countryside states tend to be more conservative and more white than the other like coastal states. You'll find majority of white people there as opposed to more ethnic diversity. Okay, so if you move down from Idaho, you got Utah. So Utah is a state with very beautiful, it has kind of desert, but it has lots of like canyons, mountains, and skiing is great. It has a great Salt Lake. It has Salt Lake, which is it has a very interesting environment for sightseeing. It's also known the place where there's a high concentration of Mormons there. So I'd say a majority of people of the population of Utah are Mormon. So that's unique too. Okay, below Utah you have Arizona, which is next to Mexico. This area of Utah and Arizona is also known for where the Grand Canyon is. It's relatively dry, kind of hot. There's mountains, there's canyons. It's very beautiful. There's some Native Americans in some areas, and again Arizona is next to Mexico, so there's a little bit of a Mexican influence probably in the southern part of it. It's very hot. I think it's the hottest state in America. In the summer it gets very, very hot there, very high temperatures. People go there to play golf, or it's not so highly populated. It's a relatively kind of newly developed place. Okay, so then if we go west of Arizona, we have Nevada, and Nevada is kind of a unique state. It's relatively large. It's kind of known as a state where a lot of people in California go to take a vacation. It's famous for mountains, and it's famous for Lake Tahoe. It's a large lake. So you can go there in the summer to enjoy marine sports. You can go in there winter to ski. It has mountains. It's near Utah and Arizona, so it's warm. It has a nice environment. It's known as a state more not so much for having like lots of big businesses, but more for like people to go there for just vacations. Okay, and then west of Nevada you have California. The total size of California is the same landmass of the country of Japan, but the population of California is much less than the population in Japan. So if you can think of one Japan with maybe 1/10 the population, you can understand it's not so crowded. So, but it's a very nice state. It has Los Angeles, San Diego, San Francisco, so it has several very famous big cities there, places that are very popular to live, expensive to buy a home, but it has a lot of big famous companies, the IT industries in San Francisco. It has a lot of famous universities. The movie industry is there. You're on the Pacific Ocean. You're next to Mexico. It's sunny. You have palm trees. You have Hollywood stars and lots of beautiful people because they want to be in show business. They want to be in movies. They want to be models. They like to go to the beach. They like to work out. They like to be muscular. They like to be beautiful. Plastic surgery is very common with people who live in California, especially like Los Angeles type area. Okay, so if you go north of California, you have Oregon, and Oregon State is between California and Washington. So Washington's at the very top. As opposed to the East Coast, there are many, many small states as you go down the coast. West Coast only has 3 states, Washington, Oregon, California. People get confused with Washington State with Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is on the East Coast. That's the capital, where right there by Maryland, Virginia, and West Virginia. But Washington State is famous for the city of Seattle. That's where Ichiro played baseball. And Oregon, I feel, is similar to Washington and California. They're all, you have a similar type of people, similar time of thinking. Everybody is very liberal. There's a large Asian population of Chinese, Korean, Taiwanese, Japanese, Vietnamese. You find a large population of Asian people that live on the West Coast, Washington, Oregon, and California. But I find of the 3 states, Oregon probably is the least famous internationally. Oregon has one city, Portland, but it's smaller than Seattle. So there are some businesses in Oregon, but there's more businesses in Washington, and there's definitely more businesses in California. So I find Oregon similar to Washington, but it's cheaper, a little bit cheaper to live there, and a little bit smaller population. Okay, and then to wrap up, now I've just explained all the states within the continental 48 states of the U.S. Now we still have 2 more states. We have Alaska, which is a large state that is up north. Actually, it's connected to Canada and near Russia. Originally it was part of Russia, but the US bought it from Russia a long time ago. It was a great deal. But Alaska has a very small population. It has oil, it has natural resources, and it's relatively very cold, but it's very beautiful. It's mainly all nature. It has a lot of animals. You could go there to see Eskimo or polar bears. And the unique thing about Alaska is that there are still some like Eskimos or Indian tribes up there, because Alaska sells oil to the government, I think, and the government actually pays every resident of Alaska, I believe, gets a monthly paycheck from the US government. Okay, and then finally we have Hawaii, which is, as you know, it's between the US and Japan. Not much needs to be said besides it's very tropical, paradise type state that used to be its own independent country until America kind of took it over, and so some local Hawaiians still are not happy about that. But in general, if you go to Hawaii, you don't have to worry about anything. People are friendly. It's a very developed state. It's great for vacations. It's very beautiful. The oceans are beautiful. There's lots of nature. It's green. You have green hills and mountains, and then you have the blue sea. So it really is a true paradise, and it's really nice because there is a large Asian population that has immigrated there, from Chinese Americans to Japanese Americans to Korean Americans, and you will find, because of so many Japanese go there for trips, that in Hawaii, Japanese can be spoken and used in many places. And so I find Hawaii to be kind of a hybrid between kind of America and Japan. That's it. Hope you enjoyed my description of all the states of the United States of America. Goodbye.